There's nothing that accelerates a sale or a pipeline faster than face-to-face interaction and that relationship building opportunity.
Are people actually there to purchase a solution? And it's an easy answer because our buying intent is high. They're not going to come waste their time on a meeting where we're talking about certain solutions that they're not currently on the market for.
Hello and welcome to the Health Tech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas. I'm the CEO of Health Launchpad. We're one of the presenting sponsors of this show, and Health Launchpad is the pipeline growth company for B2B healthcare. As always, a huge thank you to you for listening. And if you haven't already done so, please do hit the follow or subscribe button on whatever app you are using to listen to this podcast. It really makes a difference to us and would appreciate it if you can do that. And a big thank you, as always, to the wonderful people at Healthcare Now Radio, the 24/7 online healthcare-only radio network. They also have a podcast syndication service that's done wonders for extending the reach of this show. And we're always grateful to Roberta and Carol for everything that they do for the healthcare technology community. In the last episode, I had a great discussion with the wonderful Leah Chatham from Heidi Health and Aaron Boers from Hyro AI. And we went deep on how to get the most out of the big high investment events like HIMSS and Vive, the ones where you're committing serious budget and you have to have an extensive plan. So goals, experiential activations, pre and post execution discipline, you've got to have all of that figured out. And if you haven't listened to that one, go back. It's packed full of practical stuff and some wonderful stories about some cool things that both Leah and Aaron did at HIMSS and Vive this year. Today's episode is kind of a companion, kind of a different perspective on the whole area of events and experiential. So the last episode was about making the most of major events. This one is about a different category entirely, which is smaller, more focused event organizations that have a narrower purpose and have really built strong communities around particular topics and as a way to bring together healthcare IT buyers. And this is where the room is much more intimate. The access can be very selective, and the relationships tend to be deeper and possibly more durable. And I've got two guests to help me along with this topic that represent very different models. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing these different perspectives. First, you're going to hear from Jane Bogue, who is the Chief Growth Officer at CHIME, which is the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives. I'm sure all of you know CHIME. And many of you know Jane Bogue. She's been in the industry for a long time and she knows a lot of people and just a wonderful member of our community. I think you're going to find what Jane has to say about how to actually use CHIME membership and the honest advice that she provides. I think you're going to find this a really useful perspective. Even if you're already involved with CHIME, I think you're going to get some new ideas. Then you're going to hear from Jeremy Gottlich. So Jeremy is the partnership lead at Elion Health. And if you haven't come across Elion yet, I think you're going to find them really interesting. They're a research and intelligence platform focused on healthcare technology with a sort of a heavy bent towards AI and emerging technology. And they've started running intimate summits, like 30, 40 people max, built around something that most event organizers don't talk about only, which is confirmed buying intent. So Jeremy's going to explain what that means and why the model is genuinely different for everything that's out there. By the way, I recorded both of these interviews at Vive, and you're going to hear Jane first and then Jeremy. So let's get into it. Jane, welcome to the show. I'm very honored to have an esteemed guest from the mighty CHIME. No, it is wonderful to have you on the show. We've known each other sort of kind of a little bit for about 2 or 3 years. And, we've definitely had a few glasses of wine at various events. So tell everybody about yourself.
Okay. Great. I'm delighted to be here, and I thank you for the invitation. So my name is Jane Bogue. I am the Chief Growth Officer at CHIME. So this is a new role. My primary responsibility is corporate membership. So I work with the vendor community. And then I also am responsible for anything that we do outside of that is sponsorship-based. So our event sponsorships, media and marketing services, that type of thing. So I really liaison with the vendor community and partner with a woman by the name of Nicole Kirkenbush, who handles everything on the provider side. So what she does on an education perspective, I try and monetize. And so, CHIME as an organization is, I think, evolving like any association. I think it's been under pressure because of just the way that people can network and form communities now. The internet has kind of democratized that. And, we've got to stay relevant to the market. We've got to evolve. And over the last few years, we've done a lot to make sure that we continue to be a valuable resource for digital health leaders. And so we are broadening out our membership base, going after other senior technology leads that may not be in that CIO role, but are responsible for driving digital transformation through technology with their organizations. So it's been a fun ride. I've been with the organization for about 4 years. So there's 3 levels of membership there. They each come with different tiers of benefits. There's a lot of strategic engagements that we bake into this. So, I think they're incredibly valuable when they're leveraged appropriately. But it does take time and it does take some dedication from an organization. But each level is designed to connect you with the CIO members, or the digital health leaders that you're trying to influence, to give you some insight on the problems that they're struggling with and how you can possibly help. At our core, when I'm talking to somebody about joining CHIME, I try to stress that it's not a pipeline driver. This is a relationship. It's a relationship market. If you've ever worked in healthcare, people just don't buy off the shelf. They really want to trust you. And so we can put you in the room with the right people so you can start to develop those relationships so that when they do have a need, they're going to think of you first, and you're already have started to develop a relationship with them or establish a relationship that will then lead to future business and partnerships. Our provider members are looking for partners. They're not looking to buy things. They want somebody that's going to share risk with them, that's going to be able to help push their organizations forward, but also is going to do that in a way where they're in it for the long game.
Right. I remember when I had my own little software company, and, we'd be desperate for generating leads. And we worked with a partner that was a CHIME member, and they would bring us in. And they would say, you got to be really careful. There's some rules of engagement. So, and this is going back a while. I think it's evolved a bit, but there is a decorum. There's a way in which it's like, if you want to be part of this club, you got to behave in a certain way.
I think that's very true, Adam. And, I've spent my whole career in events and media and marketing. And I've always been in a sales leadership role. This is the first role I've had where I've really had to coach our vendor partners on how to interact. And we actually do a lot of training for them as a membership benefit on how to sell to a CIO. So our board will come in and help to do some education, again, because they're looking for a partnership. They're not looking, you can't take the attendee list and put it in a BDR department and expect that to be impactful. It's a quick way to get yourself blacklisted, honestly. We try to coach against that. And some of the bigger organizations, that they have their processes and you're not going to be able to fight that. But this is a relationship industry.
Right.
And the more that we can reinforce that. So we offer focus groups as part of the market, as part of the benefits.
To explain, for anybody who doesn't know, explain a focus group.
Sure. So the focus group benefit allows the vendor partner to have 10, 12 digital health leaders in a room and moderate a conversation. And so you've got some dedicated time to start building a relationship, but you want to use this strategically.
Yeah.
And so you want to, again, structure a conversation in terms of, what are their biggest pain points? How are they dealing with those? Where does your solution kind of fit in? What we don't want to do, and we get feedback on this, the attendees will actually rank the focus groups in terms of how well executed they were. You don't want to sell to them. You don't want to, it's fine to tell them what you do, but you want to make sure that you are using this to educate and to have an executive level conversation, because that brings value not only to you as a brand, but it also brings value to the other attendees in the room. The attendees come to these programs because they learn from their peers, and that's an incredibly valuable opportunity for them and for you.
Somebody was actually on the podcast, a guy called Eric Johnson, who's the head of marketing at Harmony Healthcare IT. I asked him for predictions for this year, and he said he thought that because of the impersonalization of AI, that there's going to be a trend towards people wanting that in-person contact. And also because we are also doing everything virtually. In fact, one of the things for me for this 5 thing, this is the first time I've done the podcast in person, and it is really different, so much better. And his point was that organizations like CHIME are even more important because it is about relationships, and you're creating opportunities for people to actually connect in a relaxed way, talk about what's important, get to know each other, and build trust. And I think it's even more valuable.
I would agree. And I think coming out of COVID, I think people are really hungry to get face-to-face again and have those personal connections. There's nothing that accelerates a sale or a pipeline faster than face-to-face interaction and that relationship building opportunity. We've heard, and I continue to hear organizations asking for small, intimate gatherings. You have to be at these larger events. I think some of these events, are more valuable than others, but having a small group, having a dinner, having a smaller conference where you can really get to know 50 or 60 people over a couple days, those are where people really want to be sticky and want to invest, and because they tend to really drive much more meaningful engagement.
Yeah. But, given how long the sales cycles are, if you're going to be if you're a buyer, provider, and you're talking to a vendor, it helps if you like and trust the person, right?
Right. Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Very true.
So I just want to leave with one question, which is, for any organization thinking about, joining CHIME or another organization like CHIME. All right, there's no organization like CHIME. Let's say, thinking about joining CHIME, why would you want to join? But why also is where it's maybe it's not for you?
That's a great question. So when I'm talking to an organization that's, I call it kicking the can, wants to understand kind of, what the value prop is. Again, I think it's the relationship. So, one of the things that I say right out of the gate is, listen, this is not a, one and done, right? Yeah. If you come in, you should have a 3-year horizon here. Right. It's going to take some time to get in, to network, to start to build those relationships. And that's not going to happen overnight. So it's a longer term horizon. Yeah. I want to understand exactly how they're going to define success, because if they turn around and say, pipeline, then I've got plenty of other things I can sell to you that are going to fit that perfectly. So, let's pivot over here and we'll set up a digital media campaign that drives, but if you're really looking to get in the room with these organizations and you're committed, one of the other things that I test for is who is going to be your executive champion, who is going to be the face of your organization within CHIME, because you want to lean into it. Yeah. You want to volunteer, you want to be visible, you want to post content, you want to make sure that you are building your brand and there's a person that's going to own that and be accountable to executing against all the benefits, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of strategic benefits, but they take time and a commitment. So, I think if you're looking to build relationships, get in the room with digital health leaders, get under the covers and really understand what they're struggling with so that you can message to them better, you can be more on point, you can test your product, you can get, real unfiltered feedback. The other unique thing about CHIME is there's a real vested on both sides of the fence. The vendors are vested in the success of the providers, but the providers are just as vested in the success of the foundation firms and making sure that they have an understanding of what the real issues are and maybe what the barriers are to adoption, or, where there's open doors or easier way to kind of come into the organization. So I've been part of some, advisories that we've done with some organizations where, there was really some strong unfiltered feedback that's shaped these organizations, and there's more than one organization out there that's been a longer term member of CHIME that said, listen, without membership, without the engagement, without the access to the digital health leaders that you offer, I never would have been able to build my organization the way I have. So
that's great. So that's Jane's take on CHIME. And I think the thing that stays with me the most from that conversation is her framing that CHIME is not a pipeline driver. It can be, but that's not really the way that you should be thinking about it. And if you go there expecting it to be a place where you're going to get a ton of leads, you're really going to be disappointed. And you're going to miss where CHIME can really deliver value, which is it's about building the kind of relationships that make you, the vendor, somebody thinks about when the need finally arrives. And it takes time, it takes real commitment, and it takes an executive who's prepared to put their name on that relationship with CHIME. Now, I want to introduce you to a different model, and that starts from a very different place. And it's not before the need exists, but at the moment the need is confirmed. So Elion Health is a research and intelligence platform with a heavy focus on AI and emerging technology. What they've started doing is running intimate summits where the entire design principle is that everyone in the room is actively in market for a specific solution right now. It's not networking, it's not brand building, it's confirmed buying intent. They only invite health system leaders who are currently evaluating solutions in the specific category that the summit is focused on. And they cap vendor attendance very strictly, both in number of companies and in the number of people each company can bring. So, some similarities with something like Millennium Alliance, but much more focused and managed in a much tighter way. The way I think about it is that CHIME is where you build the relationships before the need. Elion is where you show up at exactly the moment the need is confirmed. And these aren't competing approaches. They're two different, in many ways, complementary tools for different moments in the buyer journey. And the best event strategies should have room for both of them. So we're now going to meet Jeremy Gottlich from Elion Health. And I start off by asking Jeremy what his role is at Elion.
It's a harder answer than you would expect because we're at a startup. I'm a partnerships lead is my title. But since you are at a startup, that means you take on a lot of different roles. And so, what I'm right now charged with is really expanding our events product, how we convene health system and industry leaders across, different areas of healthcare technology. And so that comes with recruitment. It comes with some sort of sales and partnerships. It comes with building community, leveraging the relationships that we have. So there's a lot that goes on to being a partnerships lead at a startup organization.
I bet there is. So Elion Health, when Bobby explained it, I thought, I always want to have comparables to say, oh, you're a bit like this. So my first thought was, you're a bit like Class because you're evaluating solutions. But you're also a bit like Health Academy or 229 Project because you do events as well. So explain the model, because this is I think, actually one of the most interesting things that's changed in the last 5 or 6 years is the emergence of these communities around a particular topic in healthcare.
Yeah. I think you can look at the problem that health systems, provider organizations are currently finding themselves in, which is there's a lot of super interesting technology in the market, especially with the boom of AI and other types of emerging tech over the last couple of years. And what Elion had sort of started in our origin story was, can we make it easier for providers to find technology that really fits a gap in what they're trying to do at home?
Yeah. Something
that really hits a big frustration point. And the idea is it is really difficult to discover and then evaluate those solutions. If I'm going to a company's website to learn more about them, which I've done now for 7-8 years, it's sometimes impossible to just read their homepage or their About Us page and understand what it is that they do differently. And so that's what Elion is doing
Yeah.
is, in plain English, we write the product descriptions, the company descriptions for these companies. And then we let them go in and really build out their solutions page. So when a provider, and I think it's now 65% of all health systems in the country go through Elion. There's members of this team.
65%. That in 3.5 years is impressive.
It is. And, for us, it's validating that we are trying to solve a need and people are finding us and they're saying, okay, if I need to start this discovery process, Elion's the best place to start. And that's really how we are building our brand right now. I think, your question of KLAS and other organizations that sound similar, we are focused on AI and emerging tech. So that separates us a little bit.
Okay.
We also do not have this pay to play model. So if you are a vendor, and you want to claim your solution page on the Elion website, there's no cost to that. For us, we're not going to tell health systems through our marketplace who the best is. And I think we know that providers are smart enough to be able to source through this information and say, you know what, there's 20 companies listed under, let's say, denials management. Based on these profiles, I can whittle that down to 5. And that's good. That takes a lot of time away from their discovery and evaluation process.
What's the format of an Elion Health summit?
Yeah. I think it's something that we have been very intentional about designing and building, and to say, we don't want to, add our own noise to the market and be just another convener doing the same thing. And so for us, we are coming at this from, if we're looking at providers, how do you convince them to take 2-3 days out of their busy schedules to come to you when they have so many other places on their calendar? And I think the sort of secret sauce, hello world, is we focus on a few specific categories. So, last December we did denials, or we did prior auth, we did digital front door, patient financial experience. This spring it's a lot of coding. So CDI, revenue integrity, HCC, risk adjustment, autonomous coding. And for health systems that we speak to, provider organizations we speak to, we say, if this is an area that you're currently searching for a solution, this is going to be a great event for you, because we are going to bring in 5 vendors across each of those categories, and they're going to have a chance to pitch to you. But that pitch is not going to be just marketing language. That is going to be what it is that they actually do that's unique. What is that special technology? What is the service that goes along with that technology? And so you spend 2.5 days with us, you get to hear from 15 companies that we have vetted that we think offer something really unique. And that 3 days is going to save, hopefully, you and your team a ton more time that you would have had to spend really trying to whittle down to those types of companies.
Interesting. So it's a very narrow set of use cases. So like prior auth, right? Which is a hot topic. But, if you ask anybody outside of healthcare, what's prior auth, they'll look at you like, I have literally no idea what you're talking about. But if you said health tech, they kind of like, they could say, oh yeah, it's sort of that thing where you've got my records, right?
Yeah.
But that is a really narrow, specific.
And it allows us to then talk to health systems and say, we would love for all of you guys to come to our meeting, but if you're not actually in the market for this, this isn't going to be worth your while. And what's great about that is, you get to be more direct with the providers. And then on the vendor side, they also, the question is always, why should I spend money? Are people actually there to purchase a solution? And it's an easy answer, because the buying intent is high. They're not going to come waste their time on a meeting where we're talking about certain solutions that they're not currently on the market for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So typically, how many providers and how many vendors would be at one of these events?
Yeah, so it's a small community. We are trying to limit the, let's say, provider audience to 25, 30 health systems. Sometimes it's one person per organization, sometimes it's 2 or 3. So, it could be an audience of 30, 35 executives in the room. On the vendor side, it's, really a maximum of 15 companies that would come. And we've also been very, let's say, strict about the number of executives per vendor organization. We want to keep that at 1. And so when you
just one
per
wow,
company, which sometimes a tough sell, but after our December meeting, the feedback was incredibly positive. People really love the ratio in the room. If you're bringing 2 people, every other company's bringing 2, and it's not the feeling that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's an arms race.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that we're doing this interview at Vive, and I'm a big fan of Vive and HIMSS. I can't remember the last time I missed a HIMSS event, big HIMSS event, and I've been to most of the Vives in the last 5 years, and I think they're really well done. Some years are better than others, but They're generally what they do very, very well. And I've had quite a few guests on the show in the last few months to talk about events. And there's a recurring theme, which is, at the end of the day, there's a shift from leads to relationships. So, it used to be the measure of success of a big event is how many leads do you get, sort of funneling those in and qualifying the ones that you can. But what I also hear is that that's shifted to actually it's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's about the quality of the conversations and the relationships that it helps you build, whether it's a new relationship or meeting somebody for the first time in person. And so what a lot of companies are doing is they're shifting their event dollars to smaller events. And I think that what you do is really well aligned with that. And why do you think that is? What's going on?
I'm glad you bring up that question because, for us at Elion, if that is the trend, that's perfect. And I think we see it. And we saw that when I was with the Health Management Academy for 7 years, that people often didn't think about the smaller organizations, those more intimate spaces, as where they should be prioritizing their marketing spend, especially in the event space. And so I think you're right. I would go to a Becker's, let's say, and talk to companies and say, why are you here? It was sometimes the easiest conversation for me in the sort of sales role because you can quickly, in the moment, show them, hey, we're not talking to the right people. There is absolutely no prospecting happening because there's no senior leaders here. And if they are here, they're on a panel and they're not spending much time going around the booth. So I think you're absolutely right that, I wasn't coming to these events, years ago. So I don't have a full picture, but that type of prospecting doesn't seem to be happening. It doesn't mean that these events aren't valuable. I think, being here for the last couple of days, you get to, for me, walk around the booths and just learn a lot about very interesting technology companies. Some of them are startups like Elion, more smaller, innovative spaces. And this is a chance for them to brand themselves a little bit and get their name out there. And, I was talking to Bobby earlier today and yesterday about this serendipity that happens at these meetings where you just run into people and you have conversations that weren't necessarily planned. And it's a lot of learning that happens throughout this time, which is great. I think that will then entail that coming out of this, if you're expected to show your boss that this is the number of leads that you had, you're going to look like a failure. And so I think it's changing those metrics and coming away from this event with a different idea of what success is.
Yeah.
Because again, absolutely agree. The sort of generation of new leads might not be happening at these things and are shifting to, I think, some more of those smaller events where you have those quality conversations, again, as you earlier stated. And so it's just being very honest with yourself, being prepared for the types of conversations you're going to have, what you're expected to come out of this with, and then move forward. But, I think there's power in diversifying how you think about events and your marketing strategy.
Well, I think there's a lot to take away from both these conversations. And here are the 4 things I've certainly taken away from it. So number 1, know what type of event organization you're investing in and match your expectations to it. CHIME and Elion are both intimate and relationship focused, but they're doing fundamentally different things. CHIME is about building the relationship long before a buying need exists. Elion is about showing up at the exact moment the need is confirmed. If you confuse the two or only have one, you have a gap in your strategy. Takeaway 2, if you have a CHIME membership, audit it honestly. Jane gave you 2 very clear tests. First, does your leadership team have a 3-year horizon on this investment? If they're evaluating CHIME on a 1-year pipeline basis, they're measuring it wrong and they're going to be disappointed. The second test is, do you have an executive champion, a specific person who's going to show up, volunteer, build their presence, and be accountable to actually activating the benefits? If the answer to either of these is no, you're not going to get the value that you're paying for. Takeaway 3, never put the attendee list in a BDR sequence. Jane was very direct about this. It can get you blacklisted. And I'd extend that principle beyond CHIME to any intimate event organization. The whole value of these rooms is the trust that's been built to get the people there. The moment you treat it like a lead list, you've broken that trust. Takeaway 4, start asking about buying intent as a design principle for your strategy. Jeremy and Elion's model works because they've engineered the room around confirmed need. Most event strategies don't think about this as deliberately, and quite often don't have the right people in the room. So if you're running or sponsoring intimate events, ask yourself, how do I know that the people in this room are actually in the market? And if you can't answer that, you're hoping rather than designing. Thank you to Jane and Jeremy for sitting down with me and having these conversations. And if you haven't listened to the previous episode with Leah Chatham and Aaron Bourse on how to get the most out of big events, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that one too. These 2 episodes work well together, and there's a link down below. If you found this useful, please share it with a colleague who's planning their event strategy right now. And if you haven't already done so, please hit subscribe on whatever app you're using. And by the way, if you want to talk through any of this as it relates to your marketing strategy, there's a link to book a call with me. This is not a sales call. There's nothing for sale. I'm always happy just to talk through these things. I'm Adam Chirinos, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Health Tech Marketing Show.